Hello, welcome to the Hoop Collective podcast. We talk about the NBA, which we are doing on Thursday afternoon. Joining us from the tropical climes of the Bahamas in Nassau, Tim Bontemps.
Hello, everybody.
An outdoor podcast. It's like back to COVID times. Very lovely.
It is like COVID times. It's a lot warmer here than it was in Boston.
Yeah, would have been nice to spend COVID in the Bahamas. Joining us from Las Vegas, Nevada, where he's joined the Dallas Mavericks training camp after spending some time in Nashville this week. It's Ben MacMahon.
Howdy, partners. Bontemps, just be careful of those boats. They get a little slippery.
I've stayed far away from boats at the advice of the Podfather, and so far I've been okay.
Yeah, it wasn't that it was slippery. My ass fell off the side of the boat. You want to know the truth? That's what happened. I sat on the side of the boat and I slipped. My ass slipped off of it, and that's what happened. They just said, just say it like it is. You don't have to use a euphemism.
Things happen.
Yeah. So don't do that. When the captain says get on the boat that way, just say I'll step on the boat. Thank you. All right. So I'm just back from Sarasota, where I was with the Cavaliers for a couple of days. We'll talk about that a little later. But Bontemps, I think we should start with where you've been, which is with the Miami Heat and 76ers, especially today. I think you're with the 76ers. So what have you learned with the one of the most intriguing teams in the league this week?
I mean, we talked about it a little bit on Monday on the Rat Pod around the whole league, but the thing that's just so striking about this team is that there's no drama or really any controversy of any kind. I mean, every year, it's going on 6 years, hopefully longer at the company. And every year I've been around the Sixers, there's been some sort of chaos. The first year they traded for Jimmy. Then there was, the ongoing stuff with Ben Simmons for a couple of years. Then it was James Harden showing up. Then it was James Harden leaving last year. Now, they've got Paul George under contract. They've got Tyrese Maxey on a long-term extension. They got Joel on a long-term extension. They go out and get Caleb Martin this summer and Andre Drummond and Eric Gordon and Kelly Oubre on a multi-year deal. And they finally, for the first time, feel like a team that's got a real runway. And even if you look at Joel's health and Paul George's age and say it's a 3-year runway maybe or a 2-year runway, it's still not the minute-to-minute situation that it's felt like with them for years. And look, like I've said a bunch of times, I don't think right now I'm picking them to beat Boston in a series. If Boston is healthy or Kristaps Porzingis is back, they're probably the best team in the league. I think they're the best team in the East. They should make the finals. But this team is talented enough and good enough that if they're healthy in the spring, I think they are the biggest threat to the Celtics in the East as of now. And they're pretty confident in what they're capable of doing going into the season. And it's going to be very interesting to see how they manage Joel and Paul George. It's going to be very interesting to see how this team comes together with a bunch of new pieces. But with Tyrese Maxey, Joel Embiid, and Paul George, as I've said before, I think it's the best big three in the league. And I think they've got a lot of talent. And they finally, after years of instability and uncertainty about the future, I think you can really look at this group and say, for the next couple of years, this is what their team's going to look like. And I think that has given them a lot of excitement after all the chaos they've gone through in the past.
Yeah, that's true. They have had these training camps in recent years where they were uncertain what was happening and what their team was going to look like and who was going to play. And, Ben Simmons not showing up, Harden not showing up, or, having the trade demand. But Embiid, I think, talked today about load management, or I don't know how you want to frame it. We often hear this sort of stuff in October, but what did he say about what his intentions are this year?
I mean, he gave a typically Joel tongue-in-cheek comment where Keith Pompey from the Inquirer asked him, how hard is it going to be to not play and be careful about your body? And he was like, it's going to be hard. And if they want to punch me and slap me and try to take my stuff away from me, I'm going to get mad and I might yell, but I'll understand what they're trying to do. And look, the bottom line is Joel showed up down. He said he's down 25 to 30 pounds. I don't know what he's down exactly, but he looks really good. And this whole season, pretty clearly, is going to be about having Paul George and Joel Embiid as healthy as possible on April 15th. And that is going to be the focus for this team. They went out this summer and signed Andre Drummond. Joel personally recruited Andre Drummond to come back. He's, in my opinion, probably, if not the best backup center in the league, one of the best backup centers in the league. He's a guy who can play 30 minutes as a starter.
Best rebounder
when
of all
Joel
time.
doesn't play. Best rebounder of all time, in his own words, the other day. So, and they've got Caleb Martin. They've got Kelly Oubre. They've got Eric Gordon. Like, they actually have a pretty good amount of wing depth, considering they had two players on the roster on July 1st when free agency opened. So they're going to try their best to have those guys healthy and get through the year. And look, we talk all the time on the pod about the injury slider. You could turn the injury slider off for the Sixers, you'd love their team. But the truth is, the injury question is going to hang over them, and they're cognizant of that. And that's going to be a huge focus throughout the year, is trying to get to April 15th with this group fully healthy and ready to go. And then they'll take their chances from there.
Barkley, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, MacMahon. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, when Embiid's sitting there on media day talking about it's not about MVPs, it's not about awards. He's saying, guys, I'm not playing 65 games this year, right? And
yes,
then
that seems like a safe bet.
They'll manage Paul George similarly. That's a hard word to say for some reason. So, but the thing about that is, yes, you want those guys healthy and fresh for the playoffs. But this is also a team, like, bringing in Paul George, there has to be chemistry built. Paul George is going into a major adjustment here. He's never played with a big like Embiid. He's never played on a team where the offense was running through a big. Just those guys building chemistry together along with Maxey, that's got to be factored into the whole load management thing. You want those guys playing together a lot. But then at the same time, you can't be resting PG and Embiid. And I mean, maybe they can just punt games, but at a certain point, seeding is going to be important as well. So it'll be very interesting to see how all that is handled.
So Barkley and some other people got on Embiid for being out of shape in the playoffs last year. And obviously at times in his career, he's carried more pounds than is ideal. I don't know how he was supposed to get into great shape when he had
a knee injury and missed the 2 months before the playoffs and was barely able to run. So that's certainly one time where I would put that to the side.
Right. So, but however, he has come back, he's in good shape. Talk about Luka's shape in a little bit here, because another guy who played for his national team this summer, looks like he's coming in good shape. I just think, in fairness, so he didn't seem like he had lost that much. He maybe lost a little bit of weight with Team USA, but I don't think it was like remarkable. So
I think it's been after that.
Yeah.
Well, that's a pretty, to lose 20 pounds. And how long ago has that been? Less than 2 months?
Well,
About 2 months.
I don't know. I don't want to speculate as to when he lost whatever pounds, but I didn't look at him at Team USA. If you remember, he was a little bit sluggish starting Team USA.
Yeah.
And he and it wasn't because he was really out of shape, but he really hadn't been doing much because he'd been resting his knee. So, and if you remember, and Bontemps talked about at the time, he was a little sluggish to start the Team USA and then the training camp. And then he got COVID. They didn't announce it as COVID. They just said he was sick, but I'm pretty sure he had COVID. He was traveling separate from the team. So I don't know if they tested him. They probably didn't test him, but they kind of thought that that's what he had.
Right.
So then he got sick early in the Olympics. And then when push came to shove, he was pretty good, but he wasn't in tip top condition to start that. So I don't know how he did it, but he's done it. And, he's at least saying the right things. And I think that depth that you point out is relevant, Bontemps, because one of the things that we're looking at with the Knicks in the wake of this trade, and Karl Towns was at practice on Thursday in Charleston, and I think right as we're doing this podcast, he's supposed to be talking for the first time. So we'll see what he says there. But you look at the Knicks and their depth is just really depleted with these deals. And Philly, as you said, is really built out with what in October looks like a deeper team. And, I don't know if the Knicks will be as resilient to injury as the Sixers can be in injury and rest.
The other thing,
Tibbs doesn't care about depth, but Tibbs' team also fell apart last year in the playoffs, and you can argue maybe there might be some correlation between those things. Pretty good use of correlation, by the way.
Nice
That
job.
is very good use of correlation. And the other thing is Philly has a lot more stuff to trade still. They've got KJ Martin on an $8 million essentially human trade exception to use. They've got several first round picks to trade. They've got some young players they can move. The Knicks basically have their 6 or 7 core rotation players and not much else to move. So, Philly is arguably deeper now and can do some more stuff. And, like we've talked about, the Knicks have their own injury questions. Let's see how many games OG Anunoby can play. Let's see how many games Karl Towns can play. Like, those are 2 critical pieces that have had a pretty extensive injury history at this point.
Let's see when Mitchell Robinson's back and what he looks like when he does return.
Exactly. Like, there's another massive question. So, yeah, injuries always are a factor for anybody. And for these 2 teams, as we look at these, especially these 3 teams in the Northeast a lot this year, we got Porzingis out for at least a couple months. You've got the injuries questions about the past stuff with the Knicks. And, with both Joel and Paul George, it's going to be a constant thing throughout the year. How are those guys feeling? Where are they going to be at come playoff time? Because, again, if these 3 teams are all healthy come April, which I certainly hope they are, we're going to have some incredible series. But with the histories of everybody involved, a lot of this could just come down to who's left standing at the end of the day.
All right, so let's go from the Northeast to the Southeast with the Miami Heat. You spent some time with them this week there in Nassau. I remember going to Nassau for the Heat after they won their second title before the 2013-14 season. I actually visited the Spurs training camp that year and the Heat training camp like 2 days later. And that was the year where the Spurs were like still chewing glass. And then I remember
that was incredible. You should retell the story about, because people probably don't remember it, about what they did at the beginning of that season, the Spurs.
Well, I was told, I was dispatched to go to San Antonio and go ask the Spurs about losing game 6. And it was like, oh my God, like this is not the easiest assignment of all time because, I didn't think Pop was not exactly loquacious about it in the wake of it. Mm-hmm. And so I show up there at the facility for media day and I'm I got to ask these questions. And like Pop couldn't have been more of an open book, like completely and 100% embraced it. I don't remember the exact quote, so I'm not going to try off the top of my head, but admitted how big of a failure it was. Duncan talked about it. I think the French national team had just won the European Championship, Eurobasket, and Tony Parker, I think, still had a little champagne on his breath. I think he was in sort of in a different mood. But all their guys straight down the line, Ginobili talked about it. They were like totally like ready to handle it and deal with it. Kawhi said nothing as usual. Kawhi just grunted. But I was like blown away by the way the Spurs approached it. And I remember they were then going to the Air Force Academy. They had training camp at the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, where Pop went to college. I didn't go to that. I saw him in San Antonio, but so they're at the Air Force Academy up in the, up the mountains, Pop put him through the paces, probably saying game 6, game 6, game 6. I go over to the Heat in Nassau, and I remember coming into their first practice at Atlantis in the Bahamas, and Buffalo Soldier was blasting from the speaker system. They were LeBron and Dwayne were totally just dancing, having fun. I remember talking to Ray Allen. He just relived that first practice. He relived game 6 and the shot over again. And like in the span of 2 days, I saw like both sides of it. And sure enough, the season ended with, the Spurs pummeling the Heat, taking them down. But anyway, I have that memory of when the Heat were in Nassau. So what is the mood around the Heat in this trip to the Bahamas?
The Heat are in a really interesting spot because, like we've talked about before, over the last 5 years, they've been in the conference finals 3 times, the NBA finals twice. And in 4 of the last 5 years, they've been an underdog in the first round, which when you put that together, it's a very hard thing to square. And for most of the past 5 years, they have done all that stuff with guys in and out of the lineup. There's been very rare periods of time in there when they've had all of Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero, Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, et cetera, all healthy and available and playing. Kyle Lowry, and he was there. Now he's obviously with the Sixers. He was in and out of the lineup with some injury stuff. Terry Rozier gets traded there last year. He's supposed to be a key piece. He basically doesn't play because of a neck injury after that. So obviously we saw Jimmy Butler show up to media day late. He got here to the Bahamas fine. He's with the team. Everything's been fine this week. But I think we're going to see over the next few months. So I guess it's 4 months till the trade deadline. I think between now and the trade deadline, the Heat are really going to be studying this group and trying to figure out what is this team? Is this team capable of being a top 4 or 5 team in the East and really go into battle with Philadelphia, Boston, New York, Milwaukee, etc.? Or are they lesser than that? And are they not going to be competing on the same level with those teams? And as a result of that, what does their future look like? What does the future look like with Jimmy Butler? What does it look like with Tyler Hero? What does it look like across the board? Like, I think they have a lot of really basic existential questions to ask about this team. And I also think they don't really have a ton of information, despite the fact that they've been together this long, as to what this group can really do. And so it's going to be very interesting to me to see who they start, because they're going to start Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo and Terry Rozier. And I think the other 2 spots are a little bit up in the air. And then what does that group look like as the season progresses? And are they actually a real threat in the East? And if not, what does that mean come early February when the trade deadline rolls around?
Yeah.
You're leaving out you're leaving out something unsaid there.
Which is?
I mean, you said it before.
Which is?
What their options are if they want to go the other way.
Well, and that's, again, Jimmy Butler's going to be a free agent next summer. Like, he has not been extended. So that's the question looming over all of it. There's like, what are they proof is Jimmy, what player is Jimmy at this point, and what team are the Heat at this point? That's one of the big questions, I think, in the entire Eastern Conference.
Well, and just the whole Jimmy Butler situation bears monitoring, right? I don't know. I guess, the guy had trouble getting to media day, and then he was told to people he's not going to make it. Then he shows up late, and the hair was normal, but he's all business. But dude, that coming off of Pat, the stuff last year, Pat Riley calling him out. Jimmy has a history of uncomfortable exits. Can we just say?
Sure.
So that whole situation is flammable. And maybe Jimmy follows through on what he says, and it's like, hey, contract year. This is a prove it type of year for him, and he's all business, and nobody questions his ability to play the game and impact winning when he's on the floor. But if you talk to people around the league and you say, okay, hey, who's the next big name or star caliber player who gets traded? There's at least eyes on Jimmy Butler. Now, I don't know what the trade market would be for him. That would be an interesting thing, especially as difficult as it is for contending teams to make big money deals, with the new CBA rules and all that stuff. But the Jimmy Butler situation in Miami and what might be his last year in Miami or his last half year in Miami could go a lot of different directions. It could, Jimmy's proven he can carry a team to the finals, and you have to at least say it's within the realm of possibility, but it's not the most likely scenario.
A few things on the Heat. One, as far as I know, I think Jimmy Butler wants to be in Miami. His goal is to get another contract from the Heat. He also, I think, has a player option in his contract, which
He does.
I think his intention probably is to waive and become a free agent, but he still has that out there where he remain. Second thing is that Eric Spoelstra said, even though Jimmy was late on media day and overseas, that he has been around the team a lot over the summer, and he has spent a lot of time with Spoelstra and working in the gym. In fact, for 2 guys who have butted heads on a number of occasions, Spoelstra talked relatively effusively about how he's learned Jimmy over the last 6 years, and they've gotten to a place where they know how to work with each other. So while the the optics of Jimmy being late to media day were not good. Spoelstra kind of made it clear that he is coming into camp in a good place, and that he actually was able to do a lot of work. He had to recover from those. He's had so many injuries over the last couple of years. I've even lost track of what he was bothering him at the end of last season. But he took some time off to deal with those injuries. But he was able to do a lot of work with the Heat over the summer. So I do think that Jimmy is coming into camp in a good place, at least with Eric Spoelstra, with his teammates, with Pat Riley, who I don't think was down with Jimmy wanting an extension after last year. And that's not even, I don't think I know because he said it as much, basically.
Listen, you didn't have to read too far between the lines of Pat Riley's comments and exit interviews last year. He basically told Jimmy to shut up and play basketball. And that's not a direct quote, but it's not far from it.
I will look up the direct quote while you're talking because it was worth repeating, but it was funny.
All right, let's head to the South and Nashville, where you were for a few days this week, MacMahon. You were with the Grizzlies, and I got to tell you guys, like, it's your email too. Like, every few days, it seems like I get an email from the Memphis Grizzlies, and in all capital letters, it sticks out like a sore thumb. It says Memphis Grizzlies medical update. And you're like, oh my God, what now? Like, even in August, I'm getting them. And sure enough, first day of training camp, MacMahon, Memphis Grizzlies medical update.
No, there wasn't that. There wasn't. This one didn't rise to it, but it was
essentially, though.
Yeah, it was. We go over there, and Taylor Jenkins was the last one to talk to the group, and at the end, he was like, "Oh, basically, quick medical update. Jaren Jackson Jr. Experienced hamstring tightness on a drive to the basket, basically pulled him out of practice. And at the time, he said he's going to get imaging, and we're anticipating it might be a strain." Well, he went and got the MRI, and the MRI, all things considered, was good news. It's a strain, but it's Taylor called it a low-grade strain. I was told it's a very minor strain, and they don't think this is anything.
Is there such thing as a minor hamstring strain?
Well, I'll put it like this. They don't think it's anything that will affect his availability for the season opener. You know, like, obviously they'll be cautious, and we'll see if he's playing in any preseason games. They don't know. But the exact phrase from Taylor when I asked him that was no concerns about the season opener. But look, dude, they went into camp, and Vince Williams Jr. is probably not going to be ready for the season because he's dealing with a stress fracture in a leg. Gigi Jackson, who I don't know how many minutes he'd have gotten if they're fully healthy, but certainly an intriguing prospect coming off a second-team All-Rookie campaign. He's going to be out for a while, coming off of foot surgery. He's on a boot in a boot and on a scooter right now, and the Grizzlies are in an interesting place. It was interesting to hear John Morant, because we're a season and a half removed from I'm fine in the West and all that bravado. And obviously that didn't end well. And then last year was just a disaster for Memphis, a lost season for a variety of reasons. But it's not a slogan, and it ain't going to sell T-shirts and lead Sports Center. But what he said is, we all feel like we ain't done anything yet. And I'm paraphrasing there. You can imagine what anything was. And I just thought that was kind of an interesting peek into the way that they've been humbled. And Taylor Jenkins used that exact word, humbled. And it's not just humbled by last year when they won 27, they only won 27 games. Obviously, you talk about Memphis Grizzlies medical updates. I mean, I think if you do a search, you're going to have to click through several times to see them.
There were games last year where they had more players unavailable. I don't know if they were all inactive, but they had more players unavailable than available.
There were a lot of games like that.
Yeah. They would have to screenshot the tweets of their injury list last year because it was too many characters on pretty much a consistent basis. And then obviously, look, Ja's suspension certainly didn't help matters.
He basically has barely played basketball since that quote.
Yeah,
Played a few dozen games, right?
Yeah, he played 9 games total last year. He did play one round of the playoffs the year before,
Right.
but again, the humbling started then. The
Right.
humbling started when they were blown out by 40 in a game 6 elimination at the hands of the Lakers, who had some fun at the Grizzlies' expense. I forgot what oh yeah, the Lakers in the locker room. I remember sitting there in the visiting interview room, and the Lakers locker room is not far down the hall, and you could hear them loudly chanting, "Whoop that trick, whoop that trick." So the humbling's not just last year. This is going back, the last time
Yeah, that
there was
was Dylan
playoff
Brooks,
stage.
poke the bear, etc.
Oh yeah, all that stuff. Um, and they've got their core three still together. I'm talking about John Morant, Desmond Bane, and Jaren Jackson Jr. That's a core three that has been, has had home court advantage in the first round, has won, well over 50 games a couple of different times. But there's a lot of change around that, including almost Taylor Jenkins' entire coaching staff. And they are changing their offensive system. They hired the guy who was the head coach at Paris Basket, and I'm gonna botch his name, so I'm just gonna say the guy who was considered one of the sharpest, maybe the sharpest offensive mind, young offensive mind in European basketball. They're installing his system, and Taylor said they're going to be, I think he said, a continuous movement organism was the way he put it. And it's interesting because, I asked him, like, how do you balance wanting all this movement on ball, the ball moving, off ball movement, with having one of the best dribble creators in the league? And so that's something they're figuring out. They're talking about pace, pace, pace. How does a 7'4", slim down to 290-pound rookie center fit into that equation?
He does look definitely slimmed down, though.
He looks. I mean, they've said they've been impressed with the way that he's running the floor. Talking about Zach Edey, obviously, and to me, he's probably the biggest wild card for the Grizzlies season. But I would say there is a humbled sense of optimism for the Grizzlies, but they've got to prove themselves because they really haven't proven anything in terms of playoff success.
Have you did you make it over to the Pelicans at all?
I talked with some Pelicans folks. I didn't make a practice. The Pelicans, it's an interesting thing. Obviously, there's not a true veteran center on the roster. Daniel Tice is the closest thing to it, and he's 6'8". Zion looks good. Came back in good shape. They feel like he's in a great, headspace.
As for Brandon Ingram's headspace, I'm not so sure.
Well, listen, the one what they'll tell you from Ingram is, hey, the guy's being a pro, and he basically said on media day, look, I'm not expecting the contract to be done. I'm here. I'm going to be a pro. This is where I am now, and really the best you could hope for in that situation is the guy basically saying, I'm here to do my job, and let's go. Like, I'm not going to let this contract be something that lingers and is a black cloud, and that's essentially what he has said. So that's an awkward situation that Ingram doesn't seem to have any interest in making more awkward, which, again, that's best you could really hope for in that situation. Frankly, the starting lineup and whether CJ McCollum is or is not in it has a chance to be an awkward type of situation.
Well, let me bring that myself up about that. First off, I think Ingram was talking to reporters the other day and kind of like inadvertently he just sort of said what their starting lineup has been in practice, and McCollum was in it. And that's been one of the things that's kind of leaked out, is that in their workouts. Now, we have had 3 days of practice here. I'm not trying to say that it's been decided, but they've basically been going with Trey Murphy coming off the bench and McCollum in the lineup. which is a very small suspect. DeJounte Murray and McCollum basically starting together. Um,
Well, let's call a spade about that. What's going on over the next 2.5 weeks?
Trey Murphy contract negotiations,
Ding.
extension negotiations.
yeah.
That's
Listen,
correct.
and also, come on, like let's just be real. Trey Murphy is a part of the Pelicans' long-term future.
Right.
CJ is a part of probably ESPN's long-term future. but, see, CJ, like it's transaction cycle to transaction cycle for him. It's not even year to year, for him with New Orleans at this point. That's just it's nothing against him. That's just the reality of the situation. The other reality is, quite frankly, he's at the point in his career where it probably makes sense for CJ to transition into that 6-man instant offense type of role.
I mean, listen,
Especially when the other option is for a team that lacks size, the 6'9", 6'10", floor spacing young guy who is on the rise.
I mean, listen, it would be unserious if the Pelicans go into the season with CJ McCollum starting over Trey Murphy. It would just be an unserious decision. If they're going to play this way, they need to, if they're going to play Zion at center. Now, if you want to say you need to go into the season starting Daniel Tice at center because you don't want Zion to play center full time, and then either Herb Jones or Trey Murphy, presumably, is coming off the bench, I would disagree with that, but I would at least somewhat understand why you're doing that.
Mm-hmm.
If you start CJ McCollum over either one of those guys, it's just unserious. Like, they have to go into the season. That I've said a few times. I think that lineup of DeJounte, Herb, Trey, Brandon Ingram, and Zion is the most interesting lineup a team can roll out there this year. I would be fascinated to see what that team looks like with a healthy, slimmed down Zion, Brandon Ingram at least saying the right things in the contract year, Herb Jones, one of the better perimeter defenders, just flat out defensive players in the league. Trey Murphy, who, if you talk to people around the league, has a ton of fans, guy who can bomb it from deep, has room to grow as a player. And then DeJounte Murray is an interesting player who's in a different situation now and seems very excited to be with the Pelicans. That's a group that I want to see play and see what they can do. If they are not running out there with that group, it's just hard to look at them and think that they're got a chance to be a real factor in the West. Whereas if that 5-man unit could turn into something, maybe they do have a chance to be a factor in the West. But it's got to be having their best 5 players on the court, not messing around with this other stuff that just isn't getting them where they want to go.
Yeah, and if you're making lineup decisions based on appeasing a vet, that's a tough way to go about business when you are trying to, they've kind of steadily ticked up, but they haven't ticked out of the playoff spot. Or I'm sorry, the play-in scenario. They're trying to elevate into a guaranteed playoff berth, and you don't have time, and you can't afford to be doing things you don't want to do to massage. Let's just be honest, to massage an ego. And listen, CJ has every right to have a ton of pride. He's had a great career. He's been a starter. I'd have to go back to see when the last time he came off the bench, if ever. I don't know if he ever came off the bench.
Well, by the way, you said it before, him coming off the bench is the best thing for him. Like, it's a really good role for him to come off the bench with that team, to run the offense when DeJounte isn't on the court, to space the floor when you have any of those guys come off. Like, CJ's still a great shooter. He can still run the point. He's a great vet to have around. Like, he's a very useful player still, but you can't be having him play over Herb Jones or Trey Murphy in the critical moments of the game. Like, this is the time to transition to that kind of role. And if he could do that for another 6-7 years if he wants.
Well, and the other thing here is they took not a all in type of swing, but a pretty big swing on the DeJounte Murray deal, right? And if you're going to make a major move like that, you have to put that player in the best position to succeed. And I would say one of the things that was funky about the fit with DeJounte Murray and Trae Young is DeJounte Murray is a very good defender on point guards, but defending bigger wings and all that stuff is not his forte. You're he's no longer a defensive asset if he's having to defend, these bigger wings. So I think you want to stagger those guys' minutes as much as possible.
All right. So now you're in Vegas with the Mavericks. The big news from the Mavericks is that Luka has been shut down with a calf injury. He had that quad issue that he battled last year. What else was he was
He
his
had he had
elbow?
a calf last year. It was a calf strain. Remember, he barely played. Basically, it was a Real Madrid homecoming game that they had for him,
Right,
and
right.
he only played. He like kind of limped around for 5 minutes just because he didn't want to sit. But he strained his calf a day or two before that game. Obviously, he was able to come back. He didn't play at all in the preseason. After that, was able to come back, played in the season opener, and obviously had a phenomenal season. But he ended the season with all kinds of all kinds of, the knee that lingered the entire playoff run. I forgot, I learned a new term during the finals, and now I forgot it. Basically, the chest contusion. I think thoracic.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
right. Thoracic. Yeah, I forgot about that. I will say, like, there were several times when he was like uncomfortable with his chest. Like that was
Yeah, I mean,
definitely a thing.
he was taking pain-killing injections
Yeah,
for the
right.
last 4 games of the finals. But this is a deal. He got kicked in the calf during a workout, actually before camp started. Went through the first practice, was like, hey, it doesn't feel great. It's tight. They had an MRI. Be reevaluated in a week. So he'll miss at least the preseason opener. I think it might feel better once 2 days are over. But we'll see how much he plays in the preseason, if at all. But there's zero concern about whether he will be ready to roll for the regular season opener. We talked like Luka clearly wasn't just hanging out, sipping pivos. That's Slovenian for beer, one of the few Slovenian words I know.
Um,
Sipping pivo from the time Slovenia got knocked out.
is it Pravda? Prava? What's
Pravi.
Pravi? Yeah.
And Havala. Thank you.
Yeah.
Pivo?
No, when he said the real MVP, he was
I know.
the
I'm telling you
yeah.
all the Slovenian words I know because I could say pivo.
Okay.
And I get one. I
Let me
say
ask you this. So
Havala.
now that the Mavericks are owned by the family that owns the Venetian, um, and the Palazzo, how baller do you think the suite is that Luca has in Vegas during training camp? I mean,
Well,
I'm sure
I'm
Jason
not gonna
Kidd's
tell
room is
you.
very nice, but I am sure that the Luka Doncic accommodations in Vegas are quite pleasant.
I'm not gonna say which hotel they're in, but it's actually not one of those,
Oh,
which is surprising. Um, anyways, uh, so Luka's like, it's not major injury news. He came back in good shape. He looks good. And so that's
you think
that.
Luca is going to this week? Again, since he's Venetian family, he's going to take one of those gondolas that goes down the middle of the Venetian, where he's serenaded. Can't you just see Luca just sitting back, going through the mall, enjoying that ride? Like I think it'd be terrific.
Listen, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'd be taking boating advice from you of all people.
You got that right, buddy. I'll tell you what, from evermore when I'm getting on a boat, I'm looking like an 80-year-old man,
Oh God.
Um, all right. Well, I was with the Cavs.
By the way, though, real quick, Bontemps, you mentioned Andre Drummond is the best backup big man in the league.
One of them.
Okay, I was going to say certainly it appears it'll be Daniel Gafford as in the backup role for the Mavericks, and certainly I think he would want to throw his name in that hat.
I said one of at the time because that was the name I had in my head. Like that's probably the converse. I mean, I'm sure there's other guys I'm not immediately thinking of, but they're two of the very best for sure.
All right. So I was with the Cavs in Sarasota, my first ever visit to IMG Academy.
How many rounds of golf did you play? Be honest.
0.
What?
I played 5 rounds last week in Ireland. But, none this week. It was so hot there. Have you guys ever been to IMG Academy? It's my first ever visit.
I've not been to IMG Academy. I did go to I went to college in St. Pete for a year. Eckerd College.
Yeah, your resume on schooling is legendary.
Well, that's where I went to major in business and play basketball. Neither one of those lasted the first semester.
Well, IMG is technically, I mean, there's a high school across the street where I think the kids actually go to class, but my God, what a facility.
It's a palace, huh?
Certainly
I
is.
mean, it's, where the Cavs are working out, it's like a half tennis, they've got the #1 high school football team in the country. I didn't even see their high school football facilities, but it's like a half tennis, half basketball facility. And it's like unbelievable. And you see on the
it's
walls,
basically like a college/pro athletic training school.
yes, the pros come there to train. They have clay courts there. So before the French Open, all the tennis players who live in Florida come there. There's a 4 or 5 star hotel that's down the street, where they stay when they come.
Yeah.
So I mean, I say down the street, it's on campus. It's an IMG campus. It's not like a Marriott. It's an IMG hotel. Anyway, very impressive facility. The list of tennis champions who have trained there, to say it's a who's who is an understatement. It's every great American and many international, but every great American tennis player basically in the last 30 years. Anyway, so I spent some time with the Cavs. I was waiting for Bontemps to do his Cavs corner, but
Cavs corner.
brought to you by the city of Sarasota because they were sponsoring it. The Cavs. The Cavs had logos on everything. They all had gear that said Cavs
They had
training camp.
sponsored
Oh,
training
no, hey.
camp?
This ain't Cavs corner then. This is Saratoga Square.
Sarasota.
It's also not,
Sorry, Sarasota. Soda.
Yeah. Anyway,
Their training camp was actually sponsored?
yeah, like by this, I don't know if it was by the city or the tourism board or whatever, but
That's wild.
they have all these. That's not unusual. I think, and this is, by the way, this was in the newspaper. This is not me saying anything that is
Okay.
not public. The Clippers got $700,000 from the state of Hawaii to train in Hawaii.
Really?
How's that for a deal? That's the best deal the Clippers made all offseason.
Yeah,
they probably spent more than 700,000 knowing the Clippers' opulence, but there's a business. That's not why the Cavs did it. It wasn't a money thing, but I'm saying is everything is logoed. All their people had, all their coaches and everything had the training camp polo logo. When you walked into the gym, the scoreboard had the Cavs in Florida training camp logo. It was all branded. But anyway, I spent some time with Donovan Mitchell. I did an interview that'll be on NBA Today and ESPN platforms soon. Talked to some other players. Talked to Kenny Atkinson. Everybody said, guess what? Guess what the Cavs are going to do this year to be better? They're going to play faster.
Yes.
I mean, I'm a cynical bastard after 22 years.
Like the Grizzlies, pace.
Yes. What they're going to do to fix their offense is play faster. And Donovan specifically said, Max Strus needs to shoot more threes. Strus actually averaged slightly less 3-point attempts last year in Cleveland than he did with the Heat the year before. It's basically the same, but he technically was down a little bit. They want him to shoot more threes. And, I'm looking at the team going, this is a really good team. Why are they going to be better than they were last year?
A really good team, but is the ceiling higher than the second round? They've proven they can be a second round team. Is the ceiling higher? That's the biggest question, the broad question about the Cavs, and then how, the fits of that core four within that. And I know you asked Atkinson about the two bigs and how that works. What's kind of his temperature on that situation?
So, I mean, what they are saying they're going to do is that they are going to have the ball in Evan Mobley's hands more, and he will be more of a playmaker because he hasn't
shooting more threes.
I mean, I guess that's on the list, but that's not what Kenny Atkinson talked about first. What he talked about first was putting in his hand, which means it's not in Donovan Mitchell's hands,
or Darius Garland's. You've got two playmaking, creating guards. So that's
I know
interesting.
I know. I know. The ball apparently is going to be more in Mobley's hands. He is a good passer, but I think, in
Yeah.
that regard, what you really would like him to do is space the floor to the corner. So what they're basically saying is the way he'll space the floor is by having the ball. You have to guard him if he's got the ball. Garland has added some weight with the idea that he can be a little bit stronger going to the basket as more of a slasher than just a point guard. Kenny has tried, basically their entire team is exactly the same with the exception of their draft picks in two ways. Like Jalen Tyson, who was their first round draft pick, but I don't see him playing. Like he's going to be their 11th or 12th man. They signed some two-way guys, Luke Travers, who they drafted a few years ago out of Australia. He's there, but
Well, and if he has the ball, if Mobley has the ball, and we're assuming like elbow type of touches, then Allen is dunker spot, because if he's anywhere else, you're not guarding him anyways. And so I think I still have the same spacing questions or similar spacing questions.
Here's what's being left unsaid, I believe. What I think they can get to is having Evan Mobley play center to finish games, which would potentially mean taking Jared Allen off the court.
Well, again,
This is
the fundamental problem, right?
Yeah.
If you're choosing between Jared Allen and Evan Mobley to play at the end of the games, which how often did we point last year in Cavs Corner to the Cavs choosing to play one of Evan Mobley or Jared Allen late in games, right? Then let's go back to the Pelicans conversation. If you're going to be a high level championship caliber team, you have to be able to get to a place where your five best players are on the court when the game matters. So if you're saying they're going to be trying to get Evan Mobley out there at center at the end of games, Jared Allen's one of their five best players.
Without question.
Stands to reason. This is the fundamental problem with
Jared
the Cavs.
Allen was their second best player last year. I still think he's their second best player.
Yes. Well, this is the problem. This is why, for everybody in Cleveland who gets mad at me for saying it, this is why the Evan Mobley shooting thing is so critical. Because if he can shoot the ball, they can play together. If he can't, you have to choose, and then you ultimately end up having to move one of them. And a lot of teams have centers. It's hard to get the value for a center that you're going to get by having him on the court being a very good player. That's just the facts of the reality of the NBA right now.
And I was going to say that that's why the timing of the Jared Allen extension is also so important.
That's right.
I mean, the fact that he signed that extension, I believe it was exactly 1 day.
He can be traded before the trade deadline.
One day before it would have been too late for him to be traded by the deadline. And I still, to me, there's got to be some sort of deal with the Pelicans and Cavs that would make sense.
We'll monitor that. We have to go here in a minute because I got to go do NBA Today, but let's say a couple other things. First off, one of the questions I wanted to ask Donovan was whether the knee issue that he had last year affected his thinking at all in signing the 3-year extension. He said no, the knee is not a lingering thing. That was not in his mind. So he is on the record as saying that. Because, I know that this has been basically a coronation of Cleveland, and I agree that they should celebrate getting that contract done. But
they should 100%.
Yeah. The thing that Donovan has said, and that the Cavs have basically said now that it's all done, was they think a turning point in everything was their trip to Paris last January, when they were there for 4 or 5 days to play the regular season game against the Nets, and they absolutely went uber first class on everything, including renting out a 5-star hotel. They stayed nicer than the Team USA stayed in Paris this year. And Donovan, during that trip, and it did happen to be against the Nets, a team that he may have considered trying to go to at one point. And it was very evident that the Cavs, it's kind of being left unsaid, that the Cavs were, even though Joe Tsai is like this uber wealthy guy, that the Cavs were being treated even better than the Nets, and that their organization was further down the line. The Nets were on the verge of starting a rebuild anyway.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of left unsaid that the week in Paris demonstrated that the Cavs versus Nets situation went heavy in the Cavs, but basically Donovan said that the time in Paris decided it, and the Cavs were very happy about that since they worked very hard to make that time nice, and they blew the Nets out, I believe, in that game. So he did talk about that a little bit, whatever that's worth. I think at the end of the day, the Knicks door was obviously closed. They went a different route. The Nets weren't heading in the direction of trading for Donovan. He does feel like he told me he bought a new home in Cleveland, a beautiful home. He was very excited. He's just moving into it. He was talking about that. He's putting the roots down there. I think he's comfortable there.
Look, they also have a really good team.
Yes,
they have a good team with young players.
And he said all the right things. He offered support to Darius Garland. He offered support to Evan Mobley. He said, yeah, I'm having a great career with all-star appearances and great contracts and all NBAs and this, but this isn't what I'm after. I'm after
that last one. All NBAs.
Did he make all NBA? I don't know if he made all NBA. Whatever.
He didn't last year because of injuries. I think he's made a couple.
He would have made the all NBA team last year if he'd played 65 games. He's an all NBA player when he's healthy. I don't think that's in debate. But you know that's not satisfying to him. Like everything was said correctly. Everything Kenny Atkinson said made sense. I just don't know if everybody's intentions are good. I just don't know if in reality it's going to work.
I mean, we've talked about it a lot.
One-time all NBA player.
How much?
Well,
one time.
He's a great player. He's a great player. We've talked about it a lot. The story with the Cavs is very simple. They have essentially the same team with a new coach. So can Kenny Atkinson make these players play in a different way and in some respects improve in the ways the Cavs need them to? And if not, how do they reorient the team to maximize what they have? That's the story of the 24-25 Cavs. Obviously, we are going to regularly be talking in Cavs Corner about it all year, but it's going to be a very interesting thing to watch because they're one of, we talked about Miami, we talked about Memphis, we talked about, we also talked a ton about the Knicks and the Sixers, what they did. Ton of stuff going on in Milwaukee. You've got Cleveland, you got Orlando and Indiana trying to move on from last year. Like, there's a lot of teams in the East in particular, but certainly in the league that have a lot of pressure and a lot of expectations to improve this year. And I think we're going to see a lot of fireworks across the league as, the Grizzlies, the Pelicans, all these teams in the West try to figure out where they sit, and all these teams in the East try to advance. And there's only so many places you can move up the ladder. And if you don't, what happens as a result? And all these things we're talking about sets up for what I think is going to be a super interesting season.
All right, Bontemps, enjoy island time over there. MacMahon, enjoy Vegas. I got to go see our friend Malika Andrews and go to work here. Thank you to Jackson, our producer, and Parker, our producer. Thank you for watching, listening to Hoop Collective. We will talk to you next week.
Adios, amigos.